Okay, so let's take a look at the two current super phones of the moment, the HTC One and the Samsung Galaxy S4, and try and get an idea of how they stack up against each other and against the iPhone 5. If you're thinking of switching from Apple iPhone to an Android platform, these are probably the kind of phones you're going to be looking at first if they're in your budget. And so let's take a look. Right, first of all, the specifications of these two phones is pretty immense, as you'd expect, I think, from all the hype you've heard. The HTC One is a quad-core 1.7 gigahertz processor phone with a 4.7-inch screen and a Gorilla Glass 2 on it. It has this interface is Sense, which is the specific HTC interface layered on top of Android. It has an internal RAM of 2 gigabytes and 32 or 64 gigabytes of storage. No card slot. This is a unibody design, so you can't take the back off, you can't remove the battery, and you have no card slot for a micro SD card. So you're kind of restricted in that sense. 2,300 milliamp hour battery, Wi-Fi up to AC as you'd expect from a spec of this, the latest Wi-Fi. It has the latest Bluetooth up to A2DP and NFC depending on which market you're in. And apart from that, what else? Of course, a GPS, a strange camera with what they call 4 megapixel, but it's a third sensor size, so it's a higher pixel, a larger pixel size. So it's equivalent, I think, to the 13 megapixels of other cameras. And running Android either 4.1.2 or 4.2.2, depending on where you are and whether it's been upgraded. And it comes with a stereo radio with RDS. 143 grams of phone, and all the sensors like accelerometer, proximity, compass, etc. A nice phone, as you can see, beautifully designed, aluminium metal back, and very sleek. No wayward buttons anywhere. This is the volume up and down, and the power on and off. The 3.5. Let me just get that in focus. 3.5 millimeter headphone socket. And at the bottom you have the micro USB, two stonking great speakers on the front here, which punch out quite a lot of sound. I must say one thing that I find with this handset, having used it a bit over the past weeks, is that I find this power button or wake button quite inconvenient. It doesn't sit easily in the hand and since it's one of the functions you do a lot, it's kind of a contortion to get it to work, which I find kind of a strange thing. It's not the easiest layout in the world to use for quick access with this, especially with this size of screen. So that for me is a bit of a drawback, as well as the fact that it has no capabilities of opening up, replacing batteries or changing batteries if you need to and stuff like that, and putting in additional memory. iPhone users will not miss those features because, of course, the iPhone also has no ability to remove the battery or put in additional storage. So this is really the kind of phone with the styling and all that and the build quality that iPhone users would probably like. Although I would say that if you're moving from the Apple environment to the Android environment, one of the main reasons probably doing that is to get more flexibility, and losing flexibility is something I would think you should think twice about. If you're going to go Android, you might as well get all the benefits out of it. Okay, so let's have a look at the Samsung S4. They've sold around, I think, well, they shipped around 20 million, and I think sold obviously more than 10 million of these, so it's a mega phone in all senses of the word. 1.6 gigahertz processor with 5-inch screen, Gorilla Glass 3, so it's one level harder than the HTC version. 2 gigabytes of RAM, but comes with the ability to add in a micro USB slot. It has a 2600 milliamp hour battery, slightly bigger, Wi-Fi up to AC, Bluetooth A2DP and with all the other trimmings that you'd expect, NFC, infrared port, USB OTG, a 13 megapixel main camera, and a 2 megapixel secondary camera for things like Skype and stuff. Runs Android 4.2.2, 130 grams. The major difference is, I mean, the screen obviously is slightly bigger, but for us, the lightness and sleekness of this handset, plus the fact that you can pop the back off and replace the battery if you need to, or change batteries midday, or add in 64 gigabytes of additional storage, or any number of reasons to have that flexibility, upgrade the battery to a larger size, which I've done with other Samsung handsets in the past. Just seems to us to add a little bit of more flexibility that we were talking about with Android, which makes Android such a powerful platform. That's not to say the HTC isn't a worthy handset. It is definitely, and it's a beautifully designed handset. But for our money, the Samsung has the edge. It also has the edge in silly things like this ability to access the wake button from the side. There's no kind of contortions with the fingers or the hands to operate this. You just hit the power button on the side there. As we see from the actual layout, that at the top you have 3.5mm headset jack, volume up and down, power button, home button here, and a micro USB for charging and for data transfer, and on the back camera and flash. So all in all, two great phones. I think you'll get the drift that we really like this Samsung. There's a lot of talk about the plastic back. We don't find it a problem. I think we've said this in past videos on this, because we don't spend a lot of time looking at the back. We spend most of our time looking at the front, and certainly the operation of the phone with TouchWiz, which is the Samsung version of the Android operating system, is great. I mean, it's slick and it's very easy to use. Again, people complain about functionality in that respect, and we think it's perfectly adequate for all classes of users, really, from beginners upwards. And one of the things that we like about it, which other people have complained about, is also the familiarity, the fact that it's a similar interface to the Samsung S3, which is a mega seller in its own right, and it helps if you're moving from phone to phone to get the same kind of look and feel and to make things familiar, so you don't have to keep relearning. The performance is as you'd expect with these kind of phones. They're literally the top of the range, both of them in performance, and there's not a phone on the planet which can really match them in terms of processing power and ability to crunch through apps and data and games. So there's not much to choose between them in that respect. Again, for iPhone users, you'll have to get used to the fact that Android has a distinctly different way of working. For one thing, you can change just about everything. If you don't like the stock operating system, you can change that. So you can actually run on a rooted phone, you can run a different operating system. One of the things I do with most of my phones quite quickly is to replace the standard launcher, which is the system you see to launch apps and major front interface. I tend to put on the Nova launcher, which you can get free from the Play Store, simply because I like some of the functionality, and again, I've become familiar with the whole way it works. For most people, it may not come to that, but for me, here's the Nova launcher here. Once you've installed Nova, you can then actually install different icon sets and different structures and different color schemes. In fact, completely change the look and feel of your phone using Nova as the base and the foundation for that. And it works really well. It's very compatible and very easy to install. And if at any time you need to go back to the original, it's really easy to do. It's not a one-way journey to have it running. But that's a personal preference. For you, you may prefer to stay with stock Android. If we want to go through a few more differentiators between the two handsets, the Samsung comes loaded with a huge set of sensors on it. Obviously accelerometer, which is normally you'd expect, gyro and proximity, but barometer, temperature, humidity, and gesture, sort of motion sensing. No radio though, it doesn't have a radio. They've obviously either run out of space or felt that the radio was not necessary in this level of phone anymore. I'm not sure about that, but although it was a bit fiddly to have to keep putting the headphone in all the time. All these sensors gives the phone the ability to run cool apps like S Health, which lets you monitor your health and add things like pedometer. It's got an internal pedometer, for instance, so you can check how many steps per day. I think you're supposed to do 1,000 steps a day or whatever it is to keep fit, and it helps you check that. And also things like S Translator and a lot of S apps, which S stands for Samsung, of course, which use the sensors and make it really a fun toy and also quite a useful toy in some ways. We've done this in our other video and shown those kind of apps, so we won't go through it again. The other function of HTC, which comes out of the box, is something called Blink Feed, which is a home screen which gives you the ability to, rather like Flipboard, to keep all your major information on the screen at all times. We really don't like it, so we relegated it quite quickly to a subordinate screen. The unfortunate thing about it is you can't get rid of it. You can't delete it completely, so you're stuck with it unless you change launchers completely. So you either love it or hate it, I suspect. And we're not really that fond of having that. Our home screen, we're used to having useful things like weather on there and that kind of stuff. So that's another personal opinion. Let's take a quick look at some of the functionality of the two phones side by side. So if we go into the Play Store, as you can see, the speed of operation is around the same for both. You're not going to notice much of a difference in terms of how they perform because they're both Uber phones in all sorts of ways. Game functional, if we load in a game and have a look at that, try them both, you can get an idea of the screen and the loading and all that kind of stuff. And so you see the Samsung's loading just a little bit quicker. Of course, I'm going to be doing also. Oh, no, okay. Now I've got to go down on this. So as you can see, they're both pretty, oops. Do I get sort of medal for running games like this simultaneously, both of them? They're both, crunch. They run beautifully, they have beautiful screens. I'm thinking that the, that's enough of that, I think, maybe. I'm thinking perhaps that the Samsung slightly edges it out in terms of performance and loading times and stuff like that. But there's not a lot in it. The one thing I will say about this gaming thing while I'm here with the games is nothing sucks up battery like games. And this ability to change over. I just had a break where I took a couple of batteries with my Android handset and swapped them out and did a lot of gaming and swapped the batteries out at regular intervals during a day. In other words, I'd play games and surf and do all sorts of stuff with the phone and then swap the battery out 3/4 of the way through the day and just carry on as though nothing had happened and recharge the other battery while I was doing it. It was a great facility. It meant I didn't have to sit around tied to a power socket. I could just carry on, wander around and get as much fun out of the handset as I could. This is the reason I'm that much more enthusiastic about having a removable back and keeping it so that you can replace batteries as you need. There you go. There's a quick roundup. What are the main differences between these handsets? Not a lot, really. Slight differences in the power rating, battery rating. Obviously, the unibody versus the removable back is a major difference between the two. Performance is around the same. Samsung has, of course, a much more established user base now, having powered across the world with the Galaxy S3 and the Note and other models, so more people will be familiar with TouchWiz than they will with Sense, the layer on top of Android that they have. The differences between the iPhone, well, it's obviously Android versus iOS, and that's a fundamental change. If you're locked into or you're an absolute devotee of the Apple environment and you use iMovie and iCloud and all the eyes that you can possibly get hold of and your mail and everything is done through Apple, then it's going to be a big shock. One of the funny things is the most common response I hear when people change from iPhones to Android is the shock with the keyboard. The iPhone keyboard, of course, is legendary for being user-friendly and very easy to get to grips with day to day. And when you move to something like Android, it can seem rather clunky and kludgy. But the main thing to remember about Android is if you don't like something, you can change it. And this is a fundamental with Android. I, for instance, use Swipe. I really like Swipe. So every Android handset I get, I install Swipe immediately. It just means that you can move around the keyboard without having to type in specific characters. It's not actually on here at the moment. These are test handsets. From my point of view, it makes it much easier to enter in large amounts of text easily and quickly. But if you don't like swipe, that kind of motif, you can try anything else. There's tons of free keyboards of all sorts and some really good paid ones as well that you can install to give you the kind of iPhone experience you want. The bigger screen, well, despite what Apple tells you, once you move up to a larger screen, you will not want to go back. The ability to surf and play and enjoy a larger amount of screen real estate is really something that is valuable beyond words. And you'll realize that once you get the bigger phone. I'm almost certain that Apple's going to have to bow to this inexorable growth in screen size and move up to at least a 4.7, if not a 5-inch screen for the next handset. But we shall see. It does come with penalties because you have to upgrade the battery and all those kind of things. But even so, a larger screen, for me now, I can't do without it. Larger is better. Not too big, of course. 6.6 inches or whatever the new Xperia is. Too big, I think. Anybody who's unfamiliar with Android and gets a little bit confused about the structure of it, it's quite simple once you get used to it. You're going to be playing with settings, which govern everything to do with the function of the phone and how you set the phone up and how it works and how it connects and what the accounts on your phone in terms of email and all that kind of stuff. And they're accessible via the settings app. The HTC goes through a different route. You don't get a direct, but it still has the same amount of functionality. So you'll find everything from display to sound to gestures to security. So that's on every Android handset. The home key is your friend, which is this one down the bottom or this one here, which looks like a little house, and apps. So that's the second major place. No difference there to the iPhone. You'll just find the programs that you use will be in that area. Home again to get you back to the front. And once you have those two sets of menus locked into your brain, the rest of it is fairly self-explanatory. Obviously, these icons are what they are. They mean phone, contacts for keeping your address lists, messaging, which is obvious for SMS and for email, the internet for browsing, and the camera, of course, which is the same on most phones. So there's not a lot majorly different between the basics, but it's just when you get down to things like the settings and the configuration that gets a bit confusing until you get used to it. But remember that if you remember the settings button or the settings app, depending on which operating system you're using, then you'll always be one button press away from joy and laughter. What's the conclusion? Well, if you're moving from the Apple environment to the Android environment, initially I suspect you'll really like the style and the build quality of the HTC One. It's a phone which has the same kind of design ethic, I think, that you're used to with Apple. However, as I've said earlier, from my point of view, the loss of flexibility from having a unibody design in that you can't remove the battery or add extra micro SD storage is a fundamental problem. Apart from that, I would say that Samsung has a better established reputation insofar as the accessories and the familiarity with the interface. And so from that point of view, I'm going to vote in my very opinionated way and say the Samsung Galaxy S4 is the winner for our point of view, just because of the improved flexibility. I love the sensors that are built in, the ability to do all sorts of crazy things like take temperature, and which sounds strange, but you never know. So that's the head-to-head comparison. Hopefully, if you've been thinking of switching or you're thinking of jumping into the Android waters, this will be a help to you. As ever, if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to favorite us or like us and share with your friends and subscribe to our channel to get more of this kind of stuff. Bye.